Alright, we're back, of course, talking some Final Fantasy Tactics. We have some info to go over for the game today. That comes to us courtesy of Genki, kind of curating the information, but it's from two separate interviews, one with SquareEnixGames.com and one with Famitsu. There is some important info, like them discussing why there is no War of the Lions content, kind of when they started production on the game and when they actually entered development. Also, the ability to get Cloud much earlier in the game compared to what you used to be able to in the original Tactics, which is kind of interesting. Normally, we'd kind of go over the interviews ourselves, but the Famitsu one, honestly, is quite long, and whenever I use auto-translate on the Famitsu website, it's usually kind of janky. Like, sometimes it's really good, but kind of skimming through the article really quickly, there's a lot of, like, weird translations here and there, so it's probably just better just to kind of look at the curated information. I'm just going to read over Genki's entire tweet, but we'll just kind of read over kind of quickly the shit that we already know about the game and kind of stop and talk about the things that need to be talked about. We'll reference certain things from each of the interviews depending on whether or not we need more context. Final Fantasy Tactics, the Ivalice Chronicles, details. Enhanced version for modern platforms based on the original Final Fantasy Tactics game. Brand new UI, no War of the Lions game content. So this is something that seems to be pretty polarizing, is them going with, remastering, remaking, whatever, enhancing the original Tactics versus War of the Lions. And it's a little bit weird to me just because it's something you see a lot, and I guess with kind of anything, but I see a lot with gaming where, like, a game is, like, kind of disliked or hated or whatever, and as time goes on, people like it, right? And I'm just speaking from my personal experience, right? But for a long time now, whenever I've seen people talk about Tactics, like, a lot of people seem to prefer the original versus War of the Lions. I don't know if they just didn't like the cutscenes, the changes to it, the voice acting, whatever. The voice acting where there is voice acting. Like, I don't know what the purpose is. I don't know why people prefer one to the other, but I'm not really sure why that'd be. Like, me personally, I do prefer War of the Lions just because there's additional content. I like the cutscenes and the voice acting and stuff. They kind of expand the story a bit. And there's like additional quests or whatever, additional content in the game. So it's like, why would I not want that one? The one that has more stuff to do, right? And they also add in the ability to get Balthier from Final Fantasy XII, which is fantastic. And then a character Luso from Tactics A2, which I don't think I've ever played, which is like I think the sequel to Tactics Advance. They did more to the game besides just, adding new characters, jobs, whatever. Like, they also, like, rebalanced some shit. You unlock jobs differently and stuff in the game. Whether or not they rebalanced it for the better, I can't really speak on that. That's something you guys could let me know, because haven't played the first one in a long time, and I've more recently played War of the Lions. They do actually address in the Square Enix interview why there is no War of the Lions content. Why did you decide to focus on updating the original Final Fantasy Tactics rather than the War of the Lions version? I know the members of this development team were not directly involved in the War of the Lions, but I do believe that the content of that game did fully meet expectations for players at that time. However, as we look back on everything nearly 30 years later, during the creation of this game, we asked ourselves what our team, those who created the original Final Fantasy Tactics, could do to bring this game to a newer generation of players. It was through considering this question that we came to the conclusion that the most appropriate path for us was to pay respect to the original game's experience and recreate that in the best form possible. So yeah, I guess it makes a bit of sense, right? Like, the team that's working on this, like, remaster of Tactics was partially, at least, the team that worked on the original Tactics. It's not the people who actually made War of the Lions. So I guess that does make some sense. It's still a little bit disappointing. They also go on to explain more as to why they didn't incorporate stuff from War of the Lions, which is a little more questionable. So they ask, did you consider adding elements from Final Fantasy Tactics to War of the Lions, like Balthier, Luso, and the Onion Knight and Dark Knight jobs? We did, of course, consider the addition of new jobs, abilities, and characters, including the jobs featured in War of the Lions. However, the original version of Final Fantasy Tactics is a very complete game, both from a game design and story perspective. If we were to make major changes, it would only be a loss for not only fans of the original game, but also those new to the title. With this in mind, our first step in reviving Final Fantasy Tactics in the present was to adhere to the original, but put a spotlight on the original game's characters and jobs, as well as the original gameplay experience. The development team were passionate when it came to bringing in experience as close to the original as we could. As a result, we have recreated and used the original VFX and SFX, something I hope fans of the original in particular will enjoy as they play. This idea that adding in additional jobs or characters or abilities would somehow ruin the experience for people that played the original Tactics or some people that are new to the game doesn't make any sense to me. Because for one, how would it ruin the experience for you if you're a new player? You don't have anything to fucking base it off of. You never played the original. But also, if you're somebody that is a fan of Final Fantasy Tactics, which I know a lot of people are, why would you not appreciate new stuff? Like, you've played Tactics a lot in your life. It's good to be able to play it again on modern consoles. I love it, right? And I love the changes they're doing with the voice acting and stuff like that. That's great. But why would you not appreciate, as a fan, having more jobs to test and play with and more abilities and more characters, brand new characters, right? Because, they obviously had Cloud in the original. Obviously, with War of the Lions, you got Luso and Balthier to unlock, right? But there has been a lot of Final Fantasy games that have come out since War of the Lions happened, and you're missing a pretty big opportunity. You could have added in characters like Noctis and Lightning and Clive. And why not Clive? If any character, why not Clive when it's Creative Business Unit 3? The people that made Final Fantasy 16 are making this Tactics remaster. Why would you not want to fucking put Clive in there? That just helps, like, market 16. Like, none of it makes any sense. The excuses, I'm going to call it, that adding in additional content that wasn't there in the original Tactics would somehow diminish the experience, I think is absolute bullshit. Moving on from there, because we talked about that one for quite a long time, no new submissions or new characters, which we just really kind of talked about. Uses the original's music, which I see some people kind of complain about that. They wanted some new music. Not the biggest deal to me. New added conversations written by OG director Yasumi Matsuno. Script edited and rewritten by OG writer Yasumi Matsuno for voiceover. That's not necessarily new information if you've been kind of keeping up with some of the Ivalice Chronicles info out there yourself, but I don't think we've talked about it on the channel. And I've seen Matsuno talks a lot on Twitter. He responds to a lot of tweets, for better or worse. I've seen him talk about this, kind of addressing this problem. I guess some people have like complaints or worries, maybe. I can't really speak to whether or not this is going to be good or bad. I will say I think the original Tactics has great dialogue and it's got a fantastic story. So I don't know if this, kind of new dialogue will be good or bad. I don't know if it'll make it better or will they make it worse, right? Like, it's really hard to say. I know like the War of the Lions version, they went through and like retranslated everything, but I don't know how much that might have affected dialogue or like the story itself. They kind of switched characters' names around a bit, or like the spelling of characters' names. I don't know if it affected the story at all, but like going through and kind of redoing the script entirely can have some sort of an impact on the story. And again, it might make it better, it might make it worse. I do find it a little bit strange though, going off of what we read previously for their reasons for not including War of the Lions shit. Like they wanted to preserve the original game, right? They didn't want to change it. They want to give you the original game's experience. But then you go through and rewrite the entire fucking game. That's a little bit strange, right? Like you're completely changing it. It's not what it was. Even if the dialogue's fine in the game, it's not the original dialogue. It's not the original game's experience, right? So like, I thought it was kind of weird. Fully voiced in Japanese and English, classic OG version also included. Project started after a Final Fantasy XIV collab in 2018, with full development starting after the development of Final Fantasy XVI. Yeah, now we know when they actually started working on Tactics, which it was a long time ago, dude. Back in 2018, like when they started like kind of pre-production or kind of production on it in some capacity, right? They didn't actually fully start making it, I guess, until 16 got done. But still, dude, they've been, on some level working on this game since 2018. And it's kind of crazy it took this long, in my opinion. I know they're doing other shit. They're making like Final Fantasy XIV and Final Fantasy XVI. I get it, dude. But like, this is something that shouldn't take that long to make. And like, if this was a ground up remake made in like Unreal Engine 4 or 5 or some shit, and they added in the voice acting and all that other shit, all the other enhancements we've seen, I can kind of understand it. But it is, in terms of a remaster, not that much better than like the original or like War of the Lions or something, right? Like, it's not visually this like huge step from what we've seen previously with Tactics. So it's kind of crazy that like they started working on this game in some way or another before we ever even got the first remake game. We've had 2 of the remake trilogy games before we ever even got this game. Also, in regards to the NVIDIA leak, which I think happened in September 2021, like Tactics was already in, again, some level of being made, like 3 years before the leak even actually happened. You can maybe tell us a little bit in some ways about the 9 remake, assuming that it maybe is also Yoshida's team, Creative Business Unit 3, right? Like the fact that, the 9 remake was on that list as well, alongside the Tactics Remaster, maybe the game's been being worked on in some way or another for about as long, potentially. And also the fact that it's taken so long might also kind of link back to Creative Business Unit 3, because look how long it took them to do fucking Tactics. Making a game as big as Final Fantasy IX would obviously be a lot more of an undertaking than what they did with Tactics, right? Which is just, a remaster of sorts with enhancements. OG Final Fantasy Tactics took it 13 months to make. I don't know why that's really news. Their difficulty options, casual, standard, and tactical, can change difficulty at any time. You don't know if that's brand new information, but it's definitely new info to me. And it's nice to see that you can change difficulty whenever you want to, because that's something that some games don't allow. Some games, like, you choose, easy, normal, hard, or whatever, and you're stuck with that difficulty the entire time. But it's nice that you could, like, dip into tactical, which is the new hard mode for the game. And, like, at least test it out. If it's not for you, you can just switch it back to, like, standard or, casual or whatever. Fast forward, autosave during battles, and other quality of life enhancements. You can get Cloud as a companion much earlier in the game, coming September 30th, 2025. According to Genki's tweet, you can get Cloud much earlier in this game versus the original, which is a little bit interesting because with War of the Lions, you could also get Cloud earlier, but it was just earlier in Chapter 4 as opposed to after beating a Dromolek. I'm not exactly sure when that boss fight takes place, just because it's been a long time since I played Tactics, right? But looking at the chapter breakdown on the wiki, like the Dromolek fight is kind of in the middle, so to speak. So I don't know if that's exactly the middle of Chapter 4. That's when you used to get Cloud. And with War of the Lions, you got it a little bit earlier in Chapter 4. And then apparently now, at least according to Genki, you get it much earlier. We do discuss getting Cloud earlier in the Famitsu interview, but it doesn't mention, at least with auto-translate, it doesn't mention it coming much earlier. It actually compares it to War of the Lions. So they say, also the timing of Cloud becoming a companion was late in the original version and was quite difficult to use. But this time, like War of the Lions, he becomes a companion early, making it easier to train him. So I'm not sure if there's like a difference here, because they're kind of comparing it to War of the Lions, so I don't know if it's the exact same point with War of the Lions. With War of the Lions, it was like after the Fort Bessalot, or how do you say that fucking fort's name? In Chapter 4, that's whenever you can acquire Cloud, right? Versus having to beat a Dramalek in the original version. So I don't know if that's the exact same point when you get him now with this version of Tactics, or if it is indeed just much earlier in the game. Either way, I'm excited to use Cloud when it comes to Tactics, right? I don't think I ever did with the original playthrough or War of the Lions. I don't even know if I knew you could get Cloud in the game. I don't know if it's missable, or if I just didn't fucking know that you could do it or something. I don't know, but I never did it. So I'm excited to be able to do that for the first time with this version of Tactics, but also getting to hear it voiced by Cody Christian. That's exciting. It's obviously not Remake Part 3, but it's something. It'll hold me over for at least a couple days, maybe. So my dudes, of course, that'll be pretty much the video pass off to you guys. What are your thoughts on the upcoming remaster of Final Fantasy Tactics, the Ivalice Chronicles, on September 30th? What are your thoughts on the lack of War of the Lions content? Do you like the excuse they gave? What are your thoughts on Matsuno, like, rewriting the script or the story in some way or another? Like, is that kind of concerning for you? By the way, that is the video. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are new, section in the description below. Follow me on Twitter, @YT. That's it. Bye.
Used to care what people thought, but now I care more, and nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect. We spend it with no shame. We blow that like Coltrane. We in here like Rogaine, or leave it like Cobain.